Thank you, Terry. What we'll do is I'm going to give a little presentation on an earthquake report that was prepared for the Utah Seismic Safety Commission by EERI. And EERI is the Earthquake Engineering Research Institute. It was our local chapter that prepared it and presented it to us as the Utah Seismic Safety Commission. Those of you that are not that aware of the Utah Seismic Safety Commission, our primary purpose is to promote safety awareness for seismic events. That's why it's Utah Seismic Safety Commission. And so we're always looking for ways to promote earthquake safety, whether it's through legislation, whether it's through public awareness, different studies that have been done, and so forth. This report was put out last fall, and some of you might have heard about it. We tried to get as much media publicity as we could on it. Like it says up here, Brent Maxfield, he's the past EERI president. He was one of the driving forces and actually put together this presentation, and I kind of modified it a little bit for UEMA. This is what it looks like. And I have a few copies up here. If anybody likes a hard copy after, you're welcome to come up. But we do have it online. We have it online on a couple of locations. This is our site for the Utah Seismic Safety Commission. We just updated our site, and so we're going to still be adding to it and improving it. It's really, we wanted it to be kind of like a clearinghouse for a lot of earthquake information. As you can see right there's our Utah site right there. If you get on the site, just right there on the front page, you can just drop down and there's it's called M7 earthquake scenario. And you can click on that and you can get a digital copy of this same of this report. Also, some of the things that you'll recognize, because they've been in the papers, they've been distributed over the years. Putting Down Roots handbook. There's another one that's unreinforced masonry block building design manual that we're coming out with right now. There's a number of tools that we've come out with over the years, or the commission has come out with, to help with seismic design and safety. This is the site for EERI, Earthquake Engineering Research Institute. And if you just go up there under Wasatch Fault Scenario Report, you can jump right into that. And there's other information on there as well. So both sites are good locations that, if you're interested in earthquake safety, to be aware of. The basic message of the scenario report, of this earthquake report, is prepare. Prepare to withstand, prepare to respond, prepare to recover. So, as you know, in your basic emergency management training, you have preparedness, responding, or response, and recovery, and then, of course, mitigation too. So this kind of covers all four of them. The audience for the report, of course, it was prepared for us, for the Utah Seismic Safety Commission, but it's also prepared for the governor and the legislature. We have sat down with the lieutenant governor and gave him a copy and kind of a brief summary of what was in there. And the governor couldn't meet with us at the time, but he was going to share that with the governor. In addition to that, we've given a copy to every member of the state legislature, so that they can have this awareness as well. And it's an ongoing work in progress. We will be meeting with perhaps some special committees like the Committee of Economic Development and other committees to try to get that awareness increased throughout the state, and possibly some legislation that will help. Obviously, local governments, this is a great report for local governments to look and see what you really have to prepare for. Private businesses, nonprofit organizations, families, and you individually. It's just very beneficial. Good information. This is just a picture of the Wasatch Fault that goes along. How many of you driven on Highland Drive before? Isn't that a cool road? I mean, you think, wow, this is kind of narrow. It comes up on one side and drops down on the other side. That's Wasatch Fault, part of it. And as you can see along here, there's an aerial picture of it, and it shows that a major fault there. Also, if you really are into geology and earthquakes and want to look at great faults, go up to the Little Cottonwood Canyon, and actually down here, as you drive up 94 South, as it kind of meanders up there, there's a little park, a geological park, and there's some, what do you call them, just placards that identify the different geological formations and the fault and so forth along, that goes right through the front of Little Cottonwood Canyon. So it's really obvious in some places, and in some places it's not. The Utah Geological Survey has done a great job in digging trenches at different times, at different locations, to learn more and more about the faults in different areas. So magnitude 7 earthquake, just basic earthquake engineering 101 or earthquake science 101. You have the earthquake that happens underneath. It can be miles down. It can be close to the surface. And then you have that magnitude. That force distributes itself throughout the earth, as most of you know. And then it starts shaking the buildings. Now you can have lateral forces and you can have vertical forces. So when that building gets hit, if it's far away, mostly you're going to receive those horizontal forces, but you'll also receive some vertical forces. So it's not just that it doesn't, fall over or break from the horizontal forces. You do have vertical motions that can cause a lot of destruction as well. So you can, there's different parts of earthquake engineering. You have the acceleration, the velocity of the waves, the acceleration of the waves, how fast they're increasing, and so forth. In this scenario, we took a 7.0 earthquake, all right? Now, many of you have seen the earthquake that happened in Christchurch, New Zealand. That was like a 6.3, 6.2, I can't remember for sure. So this is multiple magnitudes, orders of magnitude above that. And so it would be quite a more significant earthquake. Yet, just like Christchurch, we have a lot of unreinforced masonry buildings, so it can be a big factor. So anyway, you have the different motions and some of the calculations to determine that. So what is the scenario or this report? It really tries to predict what the basic outcome will be of a 7.0 earthquake on the Wasatch Front. It was chosen along the Wasatch Front, kind of just as a sample of what could happen. This could be anywhere along the Wasatch Front, or there's other places in the state where they could have smaller earthquakes. And it's based on the expected average of when we're going to have the next big earthquake here in Utah. This is what the report is not, the scenario is not. It's not a prediction per se. This is an approximation. This is what we think could happen. In reality, it could be quite different. The location, the intensity, there's just so many different factors that can change. But this is one scenario that you can take and learn from. And it's not the worst case. It's just 7.0 in a location. And so forth. Again, the Wasatch Front, you have the fault coming up like that. It is along the Wasatch Front. We have about 80% of the population of Utah that live there, and we have about 75% of Utah's economy is along the Wasatch Front. So you definitely have a big impact from the population sense, but it also is a big impact along to the entire state. So if you live down in Laverton, or if you live down in Washington County, or over in Monticello, and you think, you know, it's not going to really impact us that much, well, it is going to impact every city in the state. In fact, if we have a large earthquake like this, it'll have a regional impact. So it'll go outside the state boundaries too. But this is where it's important to learn from this, because we can share resources, and Tim's going to be talking about our Public Works Mutual Aid Agreement that we're promoting throughout the state and trying to get all the cities and counties to sign on to that. It really is a promotion that if the economy of the state really fails or has problems, then it does affect everybody. And again, this earthquake could happen in multiple locations. So this is an interesting graph here. As you can see, there's different seismic events. These are major seismic events that have happened along the Wasatch Front. Down here we have the Nephi segment, Provo segment, Salt Lake City segment, Weber segment, and Brigham City segment. So we have major segments of the Wasatch Front. And here's every 1,000 years, that tick mark, every line represents 2,000 years. You can go back through history and see when some of the more major earthquakes have occurred. And so, as you can see right there in the Salt Lake City segment, it appears that, you know, we could be overdue. You know, you do have a gap over here, but they tend to be fairly close, and this is where you hear on the news that, hey, we're overdue, or we really could have one at any time. And when they say any time in geological sense, that could be tomorrow, that could be 50 years from tomorrow. That's really relatively close in geological terms, but it is a major threat, and since we don't have a lot of smaller earthquakes here, like California does, we don't have a lot of wake-up calls to tell us, hey, we could have a big earthquake one day. And so that's why it's important to have these reports that come out and the studies that we do, as well as the shakeout every year, so that we can practice. I just blew that up a little bit so that you could read these segments a little bit better. It is interesting that I don't know if very many people want to move to Nephi, but earthquake-wise, that might be the safer place than Salt Lake Valley. Brigham City may not be the safest, but you don't know. It really is. It's not an exact science. It's always maturing and getting better. So, prepared to withstand. Strengthen weak buildings. We have over 200,000 unreinforced masonry buildings in the state of Utah. As a comparison, California has about 25 to 30,000, if I remember right. Now they have a little different. Their unreinforced buildings tend to be knocked down in their earthquakes, and so it's hard to keep the older ones up like here. But that just shows that we have many more, almost a tenfold difference from our neighbors that have a lot of earthquakes in California. So that is a major concern of ours, a big concern, because we have so many unreinforced masonry buildings. And non-ductile concrete buildings, basically the older buildings are not going to survive as well. Interesting note, most homes are made out of, constructed with wood, and the wood structures tend to hold up the best. And so if you do live in a home, there's a lot of redundancy in most homes with wood structures, the wood framing, and so that's a good part. So most of the new ones should hold up pretty good. Now we'll talk about buildings a little bit more as we go along. The estimation from HAZUS and some of the models that we have to predict damages is that we'll have 90,000 damaged structures from an earthquake like this. Think about it, that's a huge amount. Of course, there's varying degrees of damage, but that's a staggering amount. And of course, the majority of the deaths would come from structural failures. So we're looking at this report helps to encourage retrofitting government and government buildings that are older buildings that are concrete or unreinforced masonry block. Of course, there's the private sector as well. There's a lot of question. How do we help the private sector improve their buildings? Right now, Salt Lake City is starting a program called Fix the Bricks. And it's a great, innovative program, and they're going to be providing some funding for homeowners so that they can start fixing or improving the seismic strength of their own homes. And so Salt Lake City is already doing something that's really good. Now, it's interesting, many of you may have read in the newspaper or heard on the news that in, I believe it's Los Angeles, they're actually mandating private businesses to do upgrades, seismic upgrades. So, is that just around the corner in Utah? I don't know, but that is a problem that we're looking at, is how do we try to get private buildings to improve their seismic strength. Incentive funds, just right now we're doing a lot of public outreach and information, and we'll continue to be doing that. One of the benefits, in one of the state legislators that we were talking to, he had an idea of maybe we could rate the buildings. If they do a seismic retrofit, you could give them, they could become a seismic silver medal award winner, or gold medal, or something like that. So it kind of gives them an incentive that if they do a seismic upgrade, they can actually use that in their marketing and say, hey, look, we've done seismic upgrades. This is a good thing. Come stay in our building, put your business in our building. So whatever we can do to enhance the economics incentives can help us. Let's see. Prepared to withstand. Our building code is designed to save lives. Okay? Primarily, the building code doesn't mean that the building is going to be functional after. It is there to protect lives of those people inside. Now, we do have some that are to a higher code, like hospitals, fire stations, and so forth, that are designed to be functional after an earthquake. But the basic building code is not that way. It's to protect lives, but that building very likely could be non-functional after. And that's an important point to understand from an economic sense. If you're a business, you need to get back in there and keep doing business, or you're going to go under. So it's an important point to understand. So that's something that this report and scenario also encourages business owners to consider economic loss when constructing new buildings, and help hopefully provide them an incentive to, hey, if you want to keep your business going after a major earthquake, add a few more dollars up front and improve the seismic strength of it, and try to design so that it's functional after your disaster, not just preventing loss of life. So loss goes beyond the cost of fix or rebuild. Obviously, there's lost income from a business, employees that can't come to work. All of those contribute to a major catastrophe afterwards if you can't get your people back to work. Taxes stop coming in, and so the government even starts feeling that squeeze. We don't have that money for Salt Lake County to continue providing the services. We're prepared to respond. You, your family, your community, your city or town, your county, state, all of those are important. This is a very important number here, 2,400. Anybody guess what that means? That's how many inspectors, building inspectors, that we'll need. Any guesses how many building inspectors we have in the valley? Mike? I don't know that number, but somebody said 200? Maybe 200. To me, that seems like a high number. Yeah, and so there's, every city, has 2 or 3 building inspectors. We have about, 14 cities, various sizes. So maybe you have 100, I don't know. But this is how many we'll need is 2,400. So.
Remember, they'll be victims of the quake, so...
Yes, yeah, they can be victims as well. So it's, so maybe that 100, we have 50 that are actually can get out. And so it is a very real problem. We need to be able to have those agreements from the outside to be able to bring in inspectors so that they can help. There is a program called BORP. Won't really get into it. Salt Lake City and Murray City have adopted it. It's a program where a business can contract with a consultant, and they can provide, under this agreement, they can provide their own inspection so they can get their building up and going faster than if they have to wait for those 2,400 inspectors to come in or wait their turn. And so this is something that I'd encourage any municipality to look into. And like I say, two good references are Salt Lake City and Murray City that have already adopted it. 53,000 people are expected to be displaced, and so need temporary housing for them. Public shelters, high probability of moderate or hospital damage. Terry can speak to that much better than I can with all the exercises that you guys have gone through in the health industry. But we expect damages to hospitals. This goes through, we won't go through all the details of it, but you can see 21 million tons of debris generated. That keeps Tim and I busy in public works. And so it's a bad thing, but we won't be bored. We'll have plenty to do. Impaired roads, the same thing. 595 bridges out of 1,805. And water and electricity. You can throw on here natural gas as well. Communications. Problem as well. So quite a bit of information is also in this report. What we do. Prepared to respond, understand the scope of needed response, prepared to be without utilities, exercise for the response, prepared for building inspections, adopt policies to help get businesses and schools up and going, and essential services back into the buildings. So we have some standard emergency management principles here that I'm sure that you guys could teach me more than I can tell you about right now. But that is part of the response. And also mutual aid agreements. It's a standard thing to have mutual aid agreements with fire, police, and some of our traditional emergency responders. Public Works is also considered emergency responders. So is health departments are considered emergency responders or first responders. And so, and that's what Tim's going to be talking about in just a couple minutes, we have a Public Works mutual aid agreement that we're trying to get everybody to sign on to. Right now, we're very close to having 100% within the Salt Lake Valley of the cities in Salt Lake County. We have Utah County and maybe about a third of the cities down in Utah County now, and maybe 2/3 of the cities up in Davis County, along with Davis County itself. So we're spreading out, we're getting bigger. Our goal is to get 100%, and I'll let Tim speak to that more. So, prepared to recover. Recovery will take some years, even a decade or more. Has anybody been to New Orleans lately? That is still struggling. Even a smaller disaster like Joplin, Missouri. I talked with, went to a presentation, Lori Pritchard was talking about that. She works for KSL, one of the morning hosts, but her parents still live in Joplin. And she was talking about how they are so frustrated because a lot of the businesses are not coming back in. They feel like they've been kind of swindled by some of the developers and so forth. And what was that, about 3 or 4 or 5 years ago? When that happened? 5 years ago? Yeah. So that, I have a great slide right here at the end that talks about what can happen there. So recovery will exceed $33 billion. So this is a major impact to our state. So this is something that we don't need to go outside of the expertise of engineering or emergency management, and we look at economic forecasting and economic planning to say, how can we absorb such a huge loss like that? Anyway, ounce of preparation equals a pound of response and recovery. Obviously, that's very true. Damage-resistant buildings, less money spent in recovery, and helps keep businesses in business, educate public on the benefits of more robust building design. You can see where we're going here. But, whatever we can do to increase the strength of our buildings. And then developing business plans and continuity plans. Establish laws, rules, ordinances that address issues related to recovery. That's what we're looking at now, and that's what Salt Lake County and the State Division of Emergency Management and others are looking at. A lot more focus now on recovery and preparing for this facet, along with the other parts. And then, of course, there's little things like this where we put the debris. Mike, you can talk to that a little bit, quite a bit. But there's millions of tons of debris. Where do we put it? And I think somebody ruled out golf courses. Where's gravel? Anyway, prepare to recover. There's just a lot of things that this report also goes into: roadways, power, water, natural gas, sewage, communication, etc. Major concerns include just a few questions like this: how will the estimated economic losses of more than $33 billion be dealt with? Good question. We don't have the answer. We just put that out as part of this report. How will the state of Utah cope with added long-term losses to its economic and social health? What will be done to keep large employers who have operations elsewhere from leaving? How are residents going to be able to take care of themselves if their businesses or the companies they work for are no longer viable? What happens if you stop getting paid? So these are all important, and like it says, this report doesn't answer these questions, but it is designed to be a motivational tool to help answer these questions. And so, right at the back of the report, you'll see 9 recommendations, and I won't go into the details of them, but that's one thing I really liked about how they prepared this report, was that they had 9 good solid recommendations at the end. And so it helps not only to be aware, but it's nice to have some recommendations of how do you proceed. Now this is the graph I was telling you about. This is kind of what happened in Joplin and in Katrina. And you have the disaster. You have a normal, healthy recovery, and you get back up here to your expected activity. You drop down and move back up. A catastrophe is when you start having such huge economic losses that you can't get up. Initially, you get a lot of help. You get the neighbor states, neighbor cities, everybody coming in and helping. You start moving up that ladder. But if you can't get your economic engine going again, then it starts turning into a catastrophe, like Katrina. It's really hard to get that money back and infused into the economy. And so this is one of those areas that we really want to focus, we want to encourage the state legislature and local governments to be aware of and plan for, is that let's plan for this now, and so that we don't have to have a catastrophe. Again, you can download this report from either one of these sites right now, from the EERI site or the Utah Seismic Safety Commission site. So I'd encourage you to do that. And with that, I'll turn the time over to Tim to talk about our Public Works Emergency Management, or mutual aid agreement, and then we'll go from there. Yes?
Can we ask questions? Yeah, you got it. I was looking at maps on the internet of faults here along the Salt Lake Valley. There are 3 major that said your east side, I think it's called fault. There's one called the Taylorsville Fault over River Road, and one called the Ranger Fault. I noticed that all those faults run north-south. Do faults never run east-west? Do they not cross the Rocky Mountains at that
Wow, that's a good question.
Why?
It's kind of like the same reason why all of our major roads run north-south instead of, why don't they put freeways going east-west? There is a little bit. That was a big criticism of UDOT at one time, is that, you know, hey, we've got these great roads going north and south. We need more roads going east and west. I really can't answer that. Yeah, Joaquin?
I'm not a geologist, but what you see here is a combination of the meeting of two plates. Okay, it's Nevada's plate and the Rocky Mountain or the Colorado plate are meeting. Okay, so when they meet, they create that fissure, and our unique geographic result is we have this fissure. It's almost in the shape of a finger. It goes from here all the way up to Yellowstone. And so that's why that all those
Run north-south.
predominantly run north-south. You know, if we were in a different orientation as to where the place in that, then we'd see.
Yeah, Joaquin's right. You know, it's really the forces that are at work between the plates running against each other. It's just like a ripple effect. You throw a rock in a pond, you see the waves going out. But you don't see any perpendicular waves. The force is coming from that rock and then propagating out. In this case, you have the tectonic plates that are pushing against each other. So the forces, you see those ripples in the mountains. And once in a while, you'll see some that kind of come, you know, some cracks that come perpendicular to it. But for the most part, it's just the way the forces propagate out. I mean, that's the best I can give. If we had a you know, good geologist here, he'd probably have a lot better description.
Yeah, if you look at the mountains and the way they've risen, okay, that's the consequence of the plates coming together and the forces. So as you see the mountains, the trend of the mountains, that tells you the trend of the fault.
Yeah. And yes.
I was curious, do you know if it's a subduction fault or a slip? I just moved down from Washington State, and there's a lot about the Cascadia Fault, which is subduction, where it's diving under the plate,
Right.
versus like the San Andreas is a slip fault.
Yeah,
And
San
so
Andreas.
that has more kind of stress relievers as opposed to the.
Now you're pushing back. I have to remember what I learned in engineering or in earthquake engineering. I thought, where's my cobwebs? But yeah, this is again, you know, a geologist could answer this better, but this isn't really an induction. This isn't going down like the San Andreas Fault is in some places, especially down along South America. You have Chile and those ones, and over in Japan, where you have the plate sliding under another plate. This is kind of more of a ripple after, you know, you have the induction stuff along the coast and some slip slide, but this is more the ripples that it is going an angle, slip slide, I forget the exact name of it, but it's kind of those, like I say, those ripples after where you have the major impact of the two plates. Let's turn the time over to Tim, and then we should have some time at the end to answer more questions.
Great, thanks, Leon. It's an interesting, definitely an interesting report. I would strongly urge you, if you haven't seen it already, to take a look at it and also share it with others. As Leon mentioned, I'm with I work for the City of West Jordan. I'm also on the APWA, Utah APWA Emergency Management team there. And one of the things that we did when that was formed was take a look at things we could do to improve our responses, such as training. And one of the things we thought about, and we looked at fire and the way that they share resources between agencies. And that was actually our goal when we started this. So that's what brought about the agreement for Utah Public Works Emergency Management Agreement. You folks know the disasters can be overwhelming. Quite frankly, the City of West Jordan, I feel we have a good public works team, but quite frankly, if we have an event, even something as routine as a snowstorm that lasts more than 12 hours, it's challenging to say the least. Excuse me. So the disasters obviously can be overwhelming for the resources that we have, especially if it's something that's a long term. You folks know those events require immediate response. The public doesn't care if I don't think we have enough resources to do the job or not. They pay their taxes, they want the job done. So there's that demand as well. Then there's also the need for specialized equipment. Up until about a year ago, West Jordan, again, a city of 110,000, we didn't even have a track hoe. We had backhoes, we had loaders, we didn't have a track hoe. So there's a lot of cities out there that don't have pieces of equipment, and not to say that we have everything either in West Jordan. But we saw that as a need to have something in place where we could share those resources that not every agency is fortunate to have. Local examples, you folks see the news and the newspaper, and you participate in these events yourself, I'm sure. The floods, Santa Clara floods, Draper and Saratoga Spring debris flows. Snowstorm events, again, you know, past couple of years it's been very light. But windstorms, we get a great deal of those around here. Those could be isolated areas where, again, may not hit the entire Wasatch Front, may hit just in pockets. That would be a perfect example of something where we could utilize this agreement. Harriman fires, they also had the mudslides following that. Logan had the collapsed canal. So what we did when we looked at, there wasn't anything in place for APWA or related to Public Works directly. But one thing that was in place, and it's been in place for a number of years, you folks may be aware of it, is the Utah Board Agreement. It's the Utah Water Wastewater Agency Response Network. And that was actually used as a template. We contacted the Utah Board, Utah Rural Water, who oversees that, contacted them, and they were gracious enough to let us use it as a template. We told them what our plans were. We were looking for something not just for utility agencies, but for public works agencies. So they were gracious enough to let us use it. And like I said, it's been in place for a number of years. They have 85 agencies across the state that have signed on to it. So we thought, you know, why recreate the wheel? If there's something that's already in place, let's take that and modify it. So that's certainly what we did. It was modified, not greatly. Here and there it was modified. It was reviewed by a number of different attorneys through the process as well. And of course, each of them gave input and made some edits to it. But we finally reached a point where we had a final document. So the purpose of the mutual aid interlocal agreement is to have something in place before the emergency occurs. I say emergency, but the other thing about that is that it wouldn't necessarily have to be a city declared or an agency declared emergency. This could be something where an agency has multiple sinkholes taking place. So that's the other thing that's nice about this. It doesn't have to be a city declared emergency. Basically, if a public works agency has a issue which exceeds its resources, it can go to this agreement, contact other agencies for assistance. So that's what it's for. Also has a method of reimbursement called out ahead of time. So instead of sending resources to another agency and then trying to figure out afterwards and having heated discussions about how much a piece of equipment or operators would cost or personnel, that is called out ahead of time. It should be noted it's used in conjunction with the State of Utah Mutual Aid Agreement. It doesn't take the place of that, and it's not meant to take the place of that. It's important to note that it's administered through the Emergency Management Committee of the Utah chapter of the APWA. However, the agreement is between cities. So if we need assistance in West Jordan, we would contact other possible cities for those resources. We don't contact APWA. We go directly to those other cities and communicate directly with those folks and make arrangements. There is one requirement, and that is that participating agencies are responsible to perform at least one annual emergency exercise. And I think that's a given for any public works agency, certainly everybody that I've spoken to. The beauty of it is it doesn't cost anything to sign on to this. There's no annual fee, there's no sign-on cost or anything like that. This has to be approved by the proper party within the agency. Again, in the case of West Jordan, this went to City Council. It was approved by City Council. One thing I should note, Liam brought up that been very fortunate between the other board members in getting the bulk of the agencies along the Wasatch Front here signed on to this. If you're part of those, please don't just put this on the shelf. But we could also use your help to spread the word to any contacts you have outside of this area to get them to sign on to this as well. Obviously, it's a greater benefit to all of us the more agencies we have throughout the state. So as I mentioned, the requesting agency contacts another participating member of the Alliance for assistance. The beautiful part about that, again, if you are contacted for assistance, you are not obligated. Even though you signed on to the agreement, you're not obligated. You may not have the resources, you may have other work that's taking place, other emergencies that you're dealing with at the time. You're not obligated to provide anything, operators, equipment, personnel of any kind. So you still have that choice yourself. And as mentioned there, does not create duty to respond. Calls out reimbursable expenses, as I mentioned. We're using FEMA rates, equipment rates, or if an agency has different rates, you can have those entered at the time of the agreement comes on board, and those are your user rates, or I should say your rental rates, then if another agency were to contact you. I did have a question by one gentleman that asked me if they were obligated to bill another agency if they do provide relief of any kind. And the answer to that is no. We call that out. Our budgets are tight enough as they are, our operating budgets. Frankly, again, have barely enough resources to do what we need to do day to day. But if you wanted to provide assistance to an agency, on a goodwill basis, you could certainly do that as well. Materials and supplies are also compensated. Insurance, each participating agency provides their own insurance coverage, so again, that doesn't change. Sovereign immunity provided by the Government Immunity Act of Utah still applies. Termination, any participating agency may terminate with or without cause. To me, that's kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other, because as I mentioned, even if you're signed on, you're under no obligation to respond. But if you did want to withdraw altogether, you could certainly do that. The one thing that some people make note of and initially causes a bit of heartburn with them until they have their attorney review the document is just like the warrant agreement. The warrant agreement you sign on as is or you don't. There's no in between. There's no, well, we want to add this sentence, we want to delete this. No, it's accepted, you sign on as is. And it's the same with this agreement. As mentioned, it's been reviewed by attorneys in the past. We hope we believe we covered everything that would apply to these situations. But it is you sign on as the agreement stands. It's not allowed to be edited. Amendments can be made if amendments are submitted to the board. Those would be reviewed by the board. Consideration would be given to those amendments, and possible changes would be made at that time. This is typically what we see with the mutual aid contacts. It's awesome. I get emails from Leon on a fairly regular basis that another city, a county, another agency came on board, and they're added to the list. And then once you sign on to the list, you have access to the list, and if you do need resources, you can contact those agencies. We are looking for 100% participation. And that's why I say if you can help us spread the word, if you folks are, I'm not sure if you folks are local or not, but if you are local, please spread the word. This is not meant to be a save-all, end-all type of assistance. I wish it was, then I wouldn't have any sleepless nights. But quite frankly, it is something, it is a step in the right direction. What I mean by that is I certainly don't feel just because we have this agreement that, oh, if an emergency comes up, we'll be able to handle anything, nor would I want to present it in that manner. But like anything else, it's another little bit of assistance that could be provided. You saw a little bit in Leon's presentation here about the God forbid, terrible consequences of a catastrophic earthquake here along the Wasatch Front. You know, something like that, we're going to be looking for anybody and everybody for assistance. And that's also on those larger events, you know, you may wonder, well, why would you want, if you have everybody along the Wasatch Front or most of the agencies along the Wasatch Front, you know, aren't you covered? It's honestly, it's things like that, some of those major ones where, wow, it would be nice if it impacts a bunch of us. If West Jordan, West Valley, South Jordan, you know, the rest of us neighboring to West Jordan are in a world of hurt, it'd be nice to have some of those agencies outside of the geographical area to be able to come in and provide assistance. And that's where we need the help to spread the word to get this out to other parts of the state. Leon's done an awesome job getting the ball rolling on that. We just want to keep it rolling. I have contact information up here. I even have some copies of the PowerPoint, hard copies that has contact information. Please don't hesitate to contact me. Leon and myself, we have PowerPoint presentations, also templates that could be used, like the template that was used to take this to our city council for approval. I have copies that I'm more than willing to share with that. We realize that some of the time these things are a bit of a sales pitch to the higher ups, to the city council and mayors, but more than happy to assist with that.
I'm just going to open up for any questions, but before I do that, if I was a small town in Utah and outside the Wasatch Front, I would jump on this. I mean, you just think of all the resources of all the, already the cities that have signed on and the counties that have signed on, and immediately you could call any one of them for help. When Saratoga Springs had the fire and then they had the debris flow a month or so after when they had a big storm, they were a very small town, but this was predated this, and so there was a lot more legwork that had to go through to develop, get a bunch of municipalities that could go down there and help them. With something like this, that could have happened quicker. And so yeah, like Tim says, any encouragement you can get to your local city, or wherever you live, or any of your neighbors, it is the more the merrier, but also the more benefit we all receive in the state of Utah. Questions? Yes?
How do you know if you're on there as a city, for example? Lehigh City, how would I know if I'm signed up?
Lehigh City, I talked with their engineer down there, and they wanted to get on, but we have not received the agreement yet from them.
So we have the agreement?
You have the agreement, and so whatever, talk to your city engineer, say, hey, I forget his name, and to your city council and your mayor, say, hey, this is a no-brainer. This is great. And if you don't, if they have any questions that it's not a no-brainer, or that there's some issues with us, give Tim or myself a call, because number one, if there is a problem, we want to know, because we want to work it out so everybody can join on. But most of the time, it's just they need additional information. So Lehigh is not on there right now, but
Orange should have it, I know.
yeah. And definitely call me if you want to, or Tim. Other questions or comments? Good. Well, like I say, we're really excited about this mutual aid agreement. I really have to thank Tim. He was kind of the motivator to work with Rural Water Association and get this thing going in our committee. And it's something that is not happening overnight, but it keeps growing and growing. And the more, what we really want is that it's a living, working document. It's not just something that somebody signs off on and then they put up on the shelf. It's something that we continually look at ways that we can keep it active. Every year in our APWA conference in the fall, we reserve, the last couple of years, and we will from now on, we reserve an hour, one of our break times, for our emergency management, our mutual aid agreement. So all those members and stuff from the public works side can come and compare notes, find out what they're going to, what each other's doing for exercises that year and so forth. And so it is a living, working effort. It's not just a piece of paper. Thank you, everybody.